Good morning, children. Let's move over to the second part of this poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear by Rabindranath Tagore. Now, there's a poet, Rabindranath Tagore. Now, I'll read that poem again. Okay? Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into a dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. So that's the poem by Rabindranath Tagore. Now, let's see for ourselves what the poet's dreams were for his countrymen. Now, I'm going to explain that, in the two lines here. Okay, so let's go over to the meaning of these lines. Okay, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free. So here the poet prays to God that he didn't want his countrymen to cower in fear. Okay, he wanted his countrymen to be fearless. He wanted his people to be free from any sort of oppression or compulsion. He wanted them to hold their heads high, to be fearless, and have a sense of pride and dignity. They should not be daunted by any kind of oppression and should be determined in pursuit of their goal. Okay, so children, here the poet wants his countrymen to be free from all sorts of oppression and compulsion and to hold their heads high, to have a sense of pride and also self-dignity. He wanted his countrymen not to be daunted, not to bend down to any sort of oppression, and they should always be determined in pursuit of their goal. So in the second line, where knowledge is free, the poet dreams of a nation where knowledge or education is accessible to all. Knowledge is not something that is only for the higher class. Okay, so because in those days, if you find, knowledge was only the higher caste used to gain knowledge, or education was accessible only to the higher class. Okay, so here Rabindranath Tagore wanted education to be accessible to all because he felt that the light of education has the power to remove the darkness of ignorance. Hence he feels that everyone should be irrespective of caste barriers, class barriers, or in other words, there should be no distinction between high or low, or high caste or low caste, or even class, color, creed, etc. Knowledge should be free and accessible to all. Now, the next line, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. Now, what are these domestic walls? Now, domestic walls are the prejudices and superstitions, and they tend to divide the nation into groups, and they break the very foundation and unity of the nation. So, the poet feels prejudices and discriminations divide the people. They germinate the seeds of hostility in all. So the poet feels that there should not be any form of difference among the people based on caste, creed, language, sex, religion, and color. Poet says that these prejudices and superstitions are narrow domestic walls, and they divide the country into fragments or into groups. And these are the very ones which shake the very unity of the country, the very foundation of the country. And they also make us weak and fragile. So, the poet says that there should not be any sort of prejudice or discrimination among the people. Where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. Now, the poet Rabindranath Tagore wants his people to be honest and forthright. The words should come out from the depths of their heart, and the words should be clear, distinct. Okay, so the poet wants his people to be honest, and they should come out from the depth of their heart. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, here the poet wants his countrymen to work hard without exhaustion to reach their desired goal. So, he wants his people to achieve their desired goal through working hard, and that also without exhaustion. His countrymen should tirelessly stretch their arms towards perfection, and whatever work they do, they should do it tirelessly, and that also with perfection. They should work hard till they attain perfection. So here the poet feels that whatever words that the people utter should be forthright and honest, and they should work hard without exhaustion to reach their desired goal. Is that clear, children? With a clear stream of reason has not lost its way into a dreary desert sand of dead habit. The poet wants his people, his countrymen, to be rational and logical in their thinking. Okay? So, they should not be dictated by blind superstitions and traditional conventions. The people should not follow blind, superstitions. They should not follow traditional conventions. Okay? They should be logical in their thinking and also rational. Here, he draws an analogy between reason and clear stream. And he says that, dead habits are like a dreary desert. The poet feels that reason should not lose its way in the sand of dead habits. Okay, so here the poet wants his countrymen to be, to be, logical in the thinking, and does not want them to follow blind superstitions and traditional conventions. And he also says that reason should not lose its way in the sand of dead habits, because dead habits are, like a dreary desert. Okay? And here he draws an analogy between reason and clear stream, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. So, in these lines, the poet warns his countrymen to have a progressive approach and encourage new thoughts and ideas. So, they should forget about, blind beliefs, thoughts, traditional thoughts, etc., and wanted them to think progressively, to have a progressive approach, and also encourage them towards new thoughts and ideas. The mind should be led forward by contemporary new objectives. Okay, so they have to do away with all the blind beliefs and customs. Okay, to do away with all the discriminations in the society based on caste, creed, color, religion, etc. And the mind should be led forward by newer and contemporary thoughts and objectives. In the final line, the poet addresses the Almighty as Father and prays to him to let his countrymen to wake up to such an heavenly abode of freedom with his brightness, radiance, and confidence all around. So, in the concluding lines, the poet addresses the Almighty, addresses God as his Father, and prays to him to allow his countrymen to wake up. See, when do you wake up to such a heavenly abode? Now, when his countrymen are free from blind thoughts and traditions, when they are free from all these distinctions of caste, creed, color, thought, etc., when they've accepted contemporary new objectives, only then can they see an abode of freedom. Okay, that is the heaven of freedom. Okay, so he wants his countrymen to wake up to such a heavenly abode of freedom where there is brightness, radiance, and confidence all around. Indians do not have to cower in fear. They will be confident only if they do away with all these blind customs and traditions and discriminations, and if they accept newer objectives and ideas. They then can hold their head high without fear. So, these are the dreams that Rabindranath Tagore, the poet, thought of in his poem Where the Mind is Without Fear. So, children, in the next session, we will discuss about the figures of speech. Okay, in the next session. All right, children. So, thank you.